Mrs. Dennings always paid more attention to Celia than to the others. No one knew why she showed such favoritism, but an elderly woman, wiping tears, knew that she saw her daughter in the girl. Her daughter had died with her husband in a car accident, and the woman had no children of her own, so she put all her efforts into raising the little orphans. "Oh my God, she's so much like my Jenny," Mrs. Dennings thought, hugging the orphan girl. Celia felt the warmth emanating from her tutor and reached for her like a sunflower to the sun. Mrs. Dennings always tried to please the little girl with something tasty or buy her something new. The girl considered her teacher her guardian angel and foster mother in one. Thanks to Mrs. Dennings, Celia was able to find a job when she left the orphanage 6 months ago. The manager at the cafe was the sister of her beloved teacher, who happily took on the graduate from the orphanage. Also, the kind woman helped the orphan get her own small but cosy apartment. Celia visited Mrs. Dennings every weekend, buying her favourite sweets each time, which were her weakness. "So, Celia, how's work going? Sister says you're making great progress, and if you're determined, you'll easily become a manager." "Yes, I'm trying. Besides, I can't let you down, Mrs. Dennings." "Well, have you found a groom for yourself yet? Why are you hiding your pretty eyes? I know it's a young thing. Anything can happen." "No, I don't have time to think about grooms. I want to stand on my own 2 feet first, and then we'll see," Celia evasively replied, not wanting to develop such an uncomfortable topic further. Mrs. Dennings understandingly nodded her head, hiding a smile at the corners of her lips. She loved Celia very much and wished the girl only good. One day, Celia arrived at work and Betsy ran up to her right away. "Where are you messing around? Hurry up! Look how many people there are. It's Friday. By the way, your admirer is sitting there waiting for you." "Who's that? That man in the corner?" "Yes. Don't you see he's staring at you? He comes every day and you don't even acknowledge him." "Come on, Betsy. He's at least 10 years older than me. Why do I need him?" Celia retorted and went to the kitchen to pick up the next order. "Okay, maybe he isn't too young, but he's certainly more reliable and prudent than your peers. With him, you'll be like behind the rock," Betsy said after her departing friend. Celia didn't know the name of her secret admirer, but she knew that the man came every day for a month, invariably ordering a cup of coffee. "Thank you very much, Celia," the stranger said. "You're welcome," replied the waitress with a charming smile. The stranger smiled back, and Celia felt warmth and tenderness in his eyes. As she returned to the counter, she felt as though she were floating on cloud 9, flattered by such attention from a customer. Oh, if only there were more like him. Look at those drunk rich guys at the nearby table. They've completely lost their manners. "It's disgusting, but we still have to serve them," whispered Betsy, and nodded in the direction. Celia looked over and saw the impudent group of wealthy young men spending their parents' money, laughing and speaking louder than necessary. Cafe visitors glanced at the young men from time to time, but didn't attempt to object. Some were afraid, while others simply didn't want to invite trouble. Only the visitor who drank his usual evening coffee looked at the rich kids with obvious disapproval. Meanwhile, Celia decided to make a remark to the disturbers of peace. "I'm sorry, but could you please speak a little quieter? You're not the only ones in the cafe, and you're disturbing other visitors." "As we want, we'll speak. We paid for our order, so what complaints could anyone have against us? And everyone who is not satisfied can leave," one of the rich guys sarcastically replied, who apparently was the troublemaker in the group. "It's not up to you to decide who belongs here and who doesn't," Celia replied, irritated by the impudent tone of the rude man. "Hey, who do you think you are, acting like a queen here, huh? You're just a regular servant. Bring us our order." Celia decided not to argue and not to escalate the unpleasant situation any further. However, the rich man, who was offended by the waitress's comments, harboured anger towards her, waiting for a convenient moment to take it out on the hapless girl. After finishing her shift, Celia hurried home, unaware that a trio of impudent men had followed her, eager to take revenge on the defiant waitress. "Hey, you! What's your name? Stop!" one of the guys yelled, grabbing the girl's hand. "Let me go! How dare you!" shouted Celia, looking around frantically. But there was no one to help her. Betsy lived in another part of the city and was probably halfway home by now. Meanwhile, the men surrounded the girl, becoming more and more aggressive. Suddenly, a tall, burly figure appeared behind them and began pushing the drunken men aside. A fight broke out, and Celia's defender had a tough time. The girl wanted to help the stranger and began screaming and calling for help. The rich men were momentarily taken aback and started looking around. This delay was enough for Celia and her defender to break free from the clutches of the enraged men. Turning the corner, they ran through the courtyards to quickly get away from their... Only when they were finally safe did they catch their breath. Throughout all this time, Celia did not see the face of her saviour, but under the light of a street lamp, she was able to examine him more closely. To Celia's surprise, it was the same man who always drank coffee. "Thank you. You dealt with them quickly," she said shyly. "To be honest, I got my fair share too. I got into a fight like a little boy. Who knows how it would have ended if you hadn't helped," the stranger replied. "Oh, your jacket is torn at the back. It's very noticeable. You know what? Let's go to my place. I live nearby. I'll make you some tea and we'll fix up your jacket," Celia suggested. "I'm not against it. Let me introduce myself. My name is Brent. And yours is Celia, I already know." The man smiled and took the girl's hand. On the way to her house, Celia and Brent chatted about the details of the recent incident. "Well, here I live. Come in. Of course, it's not a mansion, but it's livable," Celia said, inviting Brent to the bathroom to freshen up and fix himself up. After making delicious tea, the girl examined the jacket and concluded that it could be mended. Under Brent's enthusiastic gaze, she deftly wielded a needle and thread, and in one moment made a couple of thin stitches that concealed the hole in the back. "There you go. You can't see the seam if you don't look closely. It's neat and it won't come undone," the girl joked, helping Brent put on his jacket. "Thank you very much, Celia. You saved me. I don't even know how to sew. I would probably have thrown the jacket away, but it's not good because it's a quality thing," Brent said, heading for the door. As a farewell, Celia stood on tiptoe and hugged her saviour, blushing instantly. Then, as Brent walked out of the entrance, she watched him until he disappeared around the corner. The next day, Celia told her friend Betsy about the incident with the rich visitors. "You see, Celia, I've told you he is a real man, and he didn't lose his cool in a difficult situation. Believe me, you're as safe as behind a rock with a guy like that," said her friend, from whom Celia could not hide an impish glint in her eyes. Celia eagerly awaited the evening to find out if Brent would come today, or if he would break his habit. But when the clock struck 6, the girl saw that the table where the man usually sat was empty. Finishing the rest of her shift, the girl went outside and saw Brent walking towards her, holding a huge bouquet of flowers in his hands. Taken aback, Celia was speechless, but the man didn't lose his composure, and, taking the girl by the hand, offered to take her for a walk. That evening was unforgettable. Brent turned out to be a very gallant and attentive suitor, with whom she felt incredible emotional comfort and warmth. As it turned out, the man was a long-distance truck driver, and he could tell many stories about different countries and the things he had seen during his travels. As they said their goodbyes, Celia and Brent kissed and agreed to meet again the next day. From then on, The couple started seeing each other every day, except when Brent had to leave for work. Every time he was away on the road, Celia worried and got nervous. She felt that she had found someone she could lean on and know that everything was all right. She was drawn to Brent every minute, and she knew that the feelings were mutual. He loved her sincerely and took care of her, as evidenced by his every gesture and look. Sleepless nights, warm embraces, kisses, and romantic rendezvous slowly and surely led the young couple to the wedding. However, Celia always had a feeling of understatement. She felt that something was bothering Brent from within, and he didn't know how to talk about it. One evening, sitting on a bench under a spreading maple tree in the park, Brent gathered the courage to tell Celia about his past. "Celia, I didn't know how to tell you all this time. You see, I was married. My wife, she died during childbirth, and I was left alone with 3 kids." "3?" Celia whispered in shock. "Yes, Celia, I have 3 kids. Twin boys, Jack and Blair, and the youngest, Kate. My wife died giving birth to her." "How did you manage all this time alone?" asked Celia, who couldn't get over such news. "Well, I got used to it. My mother left me in an orphanage and ran away with a biker many years ago. She didn't need me either, just like your mother didn't need you. But I will never put the children in an orphanage. Celia, you probably won't marry me now, will you, with such a burden?" Brent asked, sadly smiling. "Well, if that's an official proposal, I'll go for it." "Why not? I'm an orphan myself, and I know that kids need a mother, especially little ones," Celia said. "Thank you, my dear. I was sure you would understand me," Brent said joyfully and hugged his beloved girlfriend. No matter how much Betsy tried to dissuade Celia from such a serious step, it was all in vain. "Celia, why do you need this man with so many children? Aren't you thinking about your own future? Are you ready to raise someone else's kids?" "Well, you quickly changed your mind, Betsy. You were the one who advised me to be with him, and now you're trying to talk me out of marriage," Celia said, confident in her choice. Despite all Betsy's exhortations, Brent and Celia got married. Even before getting married, Brent introduced Celia to his children. She was very pleased with the meeting and was amazed at how well-behaved and polite the children turned out to be. For the twins, she became their best friend and older sister, while little Kate called her Mum. Tears welled up in Celia's eyes. At first, married life was difficult. After all, living alone with 3 small children was not easy. But Celia considered herself a strong girl and eventually got used to everything, not noticing the family troubles and worries. She believed that with love and understanding, family happiness would come on its own, eagerly awaiting her husband's return from his every trip. Celia had quit her job at the cafe and dedicated all of her time to raising the children, whom she cherished. One evening during dinner, she noticed a scar on her husband's hand in the shape of a cross. She had long wanted to ask where it came from. "Honey, what's that mark on your hand?" she asked. "Well, my childhood friend Andrew and I decided to make a mark of loyalty and friendship. A cross on the hand, like friends forever. We used a hot nail to make it. He has one just like it," Brent answered, embarrassed about his childishness. "Where is he now, your friend?" Celia asked. "I don't know, Celia. Life scattered us in different directions after the orphanage. Everyone has their own life now," Brent replied, unaware of the important role this confession would play in the future. Unfortunately, Celia's family happiness did not last long. Only 3 years full of love, care, and mutual understanding. Celia had grown attached to the children, and they all called her Mum in unison. It seemed that happiness was within reach. But misfortune came to Celia's home uninvited, plunging her life into a sea of sorrow and suffering. During his last trip, Brent's heavy trailer collided head-on with a dump truck who had crossed over into oncoming traffic. It was early morning and the dump truck driver simply fell asleep at the wheel, unaware that in a moment he would become the cause of a terrible accident. The news of her husband's death shocked Celia. The woman did not know how to cope with the overwhelming grief and relied solely on antidepressants and calming injections. She vaguely remembered the funeral, and all subsequent days seemed like a painful nightmare to her. Betsy, who had been by her friend's side the whole time, supported her as best she could, although sometimes she suggested completely unacceptable things to Celia. "Celia, put the kids in an orphanage. But where will you go with 3 of them? Huh? You'll wear yourself out. You'll ruin yourself and them. I won't give my children to anyone. They are mine, understand? They can't go to an orphanage. I'll give up my last breath, but I'll put them on their feet. They are my flesh and blood. In memory of Brent, you know," Celia said, crying. Betsy just shook her head, understanding that she couldn't dissuade her friend. A year flew by unnoticed. During this time, Celia wore the prescribed mourning and lit candles in the church to make Brent feel more at peace in the afterlife. Realizing that she needed to get the children on their feet, the young widow decided to find a job. However, she didn't return to the cafe. The schedule didn't suit her. Thanks to Betsy's help, Celia landed a job as an assistant secretary in a real estate company. The work was no easier than her previous job at the cafe, and she had plenty of worries. But that was all Celia needed. Immersed in work, she had no time to think about Brent and her difficult fate. Days went by, and the woman gradually got used to the rhythm of office work and became a valued member of the team. One day, while bringing documents for the department head to sign, Celia noticed a button on the sleeve of his shirt had come undone, revealing a scar identical to her husband's. Overwhelmed, she dropped the papers. "I'm sorry, is everything okay?" Andrew asked. I don't know how to say this. The scar on your hand, you know? I've seen it before." "It can't be. Do you happen to know Brent Murphy?" Celia asked, stuttering. "Of course. But how do you know that name?" Andrew asked excitedly. Celia, unable to hold back tears, sat down on a chair and through sobs told her boss everything about Brent, the accident, and his 3 children. At the end of her story, Andrew had tears in his eyes. He realized that he was facing the wife of his deceased friend, Brent, with whom they had been bound by a childhood oath. If not for this accidental discovery, they would have worked side by side and never known of each other's existence. Andrew, hearing that Celia had 3 children, immediately raised her salary and began to help her in every way he could, feeling guilty of not finding his friend earlier. He began to visit Celia's home often, helping her with the children. Andrew even resembled Brent, and little Kate always called him Daddy. Unbeknownst to herself, Celia began to have strange feelings for Andrew, starting with respect and ending with more serious emotions. Less than a month after their memorable conversation in the office, a special bond was established between the two, as if they had known each other for many years. "Celia, I've been thinking about this for a long time. You see, I'm lonely, with no family or children. I've built my career, and there was no time to think about a family. In short, will you marry me?" Andrew asked, shyly, like a boy. For him, Celia and the children of his deceased friend had long become like his own family. The woman agreed with joy. It was not about the help, but the fact that she liked Andrew more and more every day. They had a modest wedding, holding a solemn evening in the same cafe where Celia had once met Brent. Even the caregiver from the orphanage, Mrs. Dennings, came. She approved of Celia's choice, and Andrew was very likeable to her. "He is just as honourable a man as Brent. You can have no doubt, my dear. I see it in his eyes. He is very kind," said the woman, wiping tears of joy. And Celia had no doubt. She loved Andrew, and he loved her too. There is no doubt that looking down from heaven, Brent rejoices for them and wishes his best friend and Celia only happiness and faith in a bright future. And Jack, Blair and little Kate will never be in need of anything. For Andrew, they are like his own children. After all, the oath they gave each other with Brent many years ago is not subject to time or life's difficulties.